All right, committee, we're going to go ahead and get started. And first order of business we have is we're going to look at Senate Bill number 180, which you'll recall that we actually kicked out of this committee last week. And there were, I think, issues and concerns and discussions with individuals, and we heard and we listened and decided that there were a way to improve this. So, Scott, what motion do we need? Because we'll turn this actually into a substitute bill. At the end? So I can just...
You can just start on any amendment.
Okay. All right. So the chair at this time will recognize Representative Epley. You have the...
You want to do the amendment now, ma'am?
Mm-hmm.
Madam Chair, on Senate Bill 180, I do have an amendment that's we're going to hand out. It's on page 2, line 10. And it basically addresses what I think is a significant concern raised in opponent testimony about, and I'll get to that too. Okay, we'll back that up then, Madam Chair. Also, there was a series of, let's back this up. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to strike material lines 4 to 26, which is all the whereases, which was just, I think, in layman's terms, noise and confusing on this bill. And so we're going to strike those lines. And then the second part of my amendment, then as I launched into, which I was obviously excited about, is on page 2, line 9, and inserting the word and then a section 7. And again, Scott may explain it better than I, but this is to address the concerns raised in testimony about individuals with intersex genetic issues and also DSD issues, differences as it relates to hormones and chromosomal differences, allowing for those individuals to have and defer to accommodations afforded under the Americans with Disabilities Act for legal protections. And I'm striking the word "and" on line 7.
Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Clifford. Discussion, comments on the amendment. Representative Bryce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question. The term medically verifiable differences in sex development condition, can you be more specific on that, please?
That was terminology we got from the folks that write the for the DSD language, and those are the folks that would have the wide mosaic array of genetic differences on XYY, XO, XXY, XXXX. I mean, I can go on and on. And there's a wide array, mosaic of genetic variants, and this is simply to put them all in one situation so that if they desire a safe private facilities, they are allowed that through the ADA.
So, thank you. So to clarify, this is for the genetic type, genotype differences, not necessarily anatomical differences, correct?
Well, so that's a hard question to answer directly, and I'll say that the vast majority of folks with chromosomal abnormalities do have some type of dysmorphia in their presentation in their genital region, but not all. And so this does not address someone that might have just a variance in their genital anatomy at birth. Thank you. Okay, Bill.
Thank you.
Further questions? Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wondering, being intersex isn't a disability, so why is this being covered by the Americans with Disabilities Act?
Well, so it's a hard question to answer. Some of these individuals are indeed disabled. Many are not. Many are. And so because of that, we wanted to make sure that everyone has legal protections for secure places to utilize restroom facilities and change so that there's not issues with their genetic problem, that's all. It's not meant to say that they're necessarily disabled, but they've got the capacity to use different facilities if they desire based on their intersex chromosomal abnormality.
May I ask a follow-up?
Yes, Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So does this mean that all spaces or all facilities, public and private, will be required to provide gender-neutral spaces for folks in that category?
When they have individuals that are recognized as such, it would certainly be necessary to do that, yes. Now, in those facilities that don't, at this point in time, I guess you could have someone monitor them outside a private bathroom. But as we all know, there are many, many, many family and unisex bathrooms these days. And so we think that will meet the letter of the law for privacy and security for those individuals. But if a facility does not, they would be looking to ways in which to do that. Yes.
Thank you.
Committee, Representative Blex.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm having difficulty understand that of why they're automatically, we're just assuming everybody that may have some chromosome issues or has a disability, and why would they be covered, I guess, and the further issue that you just kind of addressed, have to provide separate facilities in this issue. I mean, I don't see that, and maybe it's just my lack of understanding of it, but I don't see how they can be so broadly covered under a Disabilities Act when a lot of them are not. I mean, normally a disability coverage is independent on its own merit that each person has to go through to deal with this, and here we're putting something in a blanket situation as you're automatically, which could bring in who knows what extra things, not only additional requirements by a employer or a business, as well as possibly some payments coming to them. Can you go ahead?
Representative Epley.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And Representative, to try to address this, first of all, the wording is not will, it's shall, so they have an option. It's not that they have to do that. And there are many of these individuals, and I'd say the vast majority in my experience, and I think Dr. Aller touched on that, are primarily identified as female. And unless they pursue this or unless they look into it and they're identified, they'll continue to be identified and recognized in that manner. So it's not a problem in that sense. It's not like we're creating a whole new definition. But for those individuals that do not feel comfortable and they have issues with where they bathe and where they change clothes, they'll have an opportunity to have a safe private area if they want to go forth and recognize their difference genetically.
Representative Black.
I guess we didn't have a problem when we wanted to put biological males into women's dressing rooms and sportings and bathrooms, and now all of a sudden we're getting a point here where it's hard for me to understand what that difference is. I guess, I don't know. On the surface, I don't know if I can support this. Thank you.
Further comments? Representative Berquist.
Madam Chair, can I address the doctor for this one, or one of the doctors, any of the doctors? In this balloon amendment, an individual born with medically verifiable differences in sex development condition shall be provided. What is the difference between an individual born with genetically verifiable differences in sex development and medically verifiable? Why is there a difference, and what is the difference? What would be the difference? Because I think we're talking about, in a lot of cases, we're talking about genetically the Y chromosome or not the Y chromosome, or other conditions. But does this apply to genetically, or does this just apply to observable?
So again, this has to be verified by physicians, and so verifiable for me implies that there's a genetic difference. But we continue to evolve in our knowledge in this field. There are alleles on the Y chromosome which can cause variances in the amount of hormones you make and the way your sex presentation is at birth. And so we continue to we still don't have the full scope of knowledge on this, and I don't know if and when we ever will. But for those individuals that identify with ambiguous genitalia or different hormone levels based upon a damage on part of their, I hate to say the word damage, but a change in their Y chromosome and how they manifest their androgen and whether it's absorbed or not. Again, it gets very scientific, but it allows them the opportunity to utilize facilities that they feel are safer and more private for them. They're not forced to. It's just that it's an option for them going forward. That's all. That's all we're trying to provide for. We heard, I thought, ardent testimony from Dr. Aller as an opponent of this, with the wide mosaic array. I mean, in her 2 pages of testimony, I brought it, and she describes a lot of those variances and also the hormone levels that manifest from that. And, you know, she said she thinks as high as 2% of the population has these types of variances. And I personally am not sure it's that high, but I do think it's something we need to recognize. And if a person has one of those conditions, I think be able to have security and privacy if they desire it. That's all this is trying to offer. It's not saying we're creating a new third sex or that we're going to have a third sex bathroom. It's just to provide safety and privacy for those individuals that are not comfortable because they have ambiguous situations or because they have mixed hormone levels or because they have a genetic abnormality that, or I'd hate to say abnormality, a genetic variance that isn't binary. Does that answer your question, sir?
Pretty close.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Reese.
Representative Epley, is it okay if I address the question to you? You've used several times safe and private area. Why would they need a safe area?
Some of these individuals do not feel comfortable utilizing the binary facilities that are available in my education. And so this is just to make sure they know that they're afforded that opportunity, that option. That's all.
Thank you.
Representative Barth, did you have? Okay, Representative Barth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. How I'm reading this amendment here is extremely vague, and I don't see how this would be hold up in a court of law and definition, and it takes us basically back to square one of why even have this bill, is what it looks like to me, how I'm reading this.
I'm sorry, Representative Epley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative, I appreciate your perspective on this. This isn't meant to muddy the waters at all. In fact, it's designed to provide clarity because of the testimony that I heard. And I wish everything was purely binary, but we know that it isn't. And so this is to address for those individuals that are not binary so that they have an option available to them if they desire to utilize it. That's all it's for. So I'm not sure I follow why you think it defeats. You know, the underlying bill is still intact, just like it is, that everything is assigned at birth, and that's what we stick to based on what the physician feels the infant is at birth. So it doesn't change any of that.
Representative Barth?
I'm not reading it the same way then. I don't think I can support it the way it's written.
Well, the one thing that I can tell you is that, let me see if I can pull that up here. The Independent Women's Voice is supportive of this language, and they were one of our proponents. And I believe that they may have been a key author of this bill. It's not something we just pulled out of our hat.
Madam Chair.
Representative Epley.
Yes, again, this was vetted with the proponents on this bill, and this was their, essentially, some of their wording suggestions. So, just FYI.
Does that help, Representative Barth? Representative Turner, or Representative Clifford, one of you?
Thank you, Madam
Representative
Chair.
Turner, did you have a question? Okay, and then
I'll yield to my...
Then Representative Clifford. I'm trying to keep track of this because my vice chair, who normally does this for me, is answering all the questions. And I'm not doing a good job.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Say, your comments specific to number 1 on page 1 is talks about, and you also mentioned it, so the doctor's determination assigned at birth kind of thing. So how does number 7 relate to that?
Madam Chair, may I address? Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Representative, to your point, there are times when infants are born with ambiguous genitalia or with features that we cannot determine. And so we will not put a sex on the birth certificate at that time, and they'll probably be referred to a geneticist or to a pediatric specialist in DSD determinations, and then at some point we'll come up with what their mosaic is or what their determination is.
Within the first few months of life, or?
It can take up to 6 months, but not generally up to 6 months of life to make that determination. And sometimes it comes later. Sometimes it comes when you realize that as this child is developing, that they're not developing like their peers at all or like they should be at this timeline. And so then they may be referred for genetic evaluation and testing. And there is a capacity to have your birth certificate changed at some point if you have a mosaic or if you have a situation that requires an amendment.
Okay, so 7 is that allowance that you just referred to for those cases that would be referred to others for determination. Is that fair?
I think that's a fair way of characterizing it, Representative.
Representative Clifford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to point out in some research I did specifically on Turner syndrome, it is a recognized disability, and I do think we need to be compliant with ADA when we pass this bill, so we will stand up in court. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Further questions, comments? Representative Blex.
Thank you, Madam. I appreciate the opportunity to comment on this. If we look at Section 1, it looks to me like that's notwithstanding any provision of state law to the contrary with respect to the application of individuals' biological sex, which I'm pursuant to state laws and rules, which I'm assuming right there is automatically covering the birth certificate. And then we go down to 2, which a female is an individual whose biological reproductive system is developed to produce ova, and a male is an individual whose biological reproduction is developed to fertilize the ova. Now, in my opinion, looks like the amendment in item 7 would nullify what's in 2, and if it takes 6 months to determine the item in Section 1 to put down on a birth certificate what sex it is, it looks like to me that we're already putting that amendment in there and automatically determine that this person's entitled to ADA issues, and we really don't know, but yet we defined it in 2. So where are we at on that? I guess, am I reading that right or am I wrong on that?
I believe, Representative Blex, that yes, you're not wrong.
Thank you.
This here, let's mark that on the calendar.
Mark that on the calendar.
Thank you. Because I don't get to always say that very often.
That don't happen very often.
Well, it might not happen with me either. This was to add additional clarity that this is what we were doing within this bill. So, yeah, you're seeing it kind of 2 places.
Well, to me, Madam Chair, I appreciate that.
No, go ahead, Representative Blex.
Thank you, ma'am. It kind of muddies a little bit of water of what we had tried to do to establish a clear clarity in 2, particularly defining that, and then this kind of throws it in there. So thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
You know, some of the reason that we're also making these changes is that we had several individuals that are not on this committee that had the same concerns that Representative Epley did. And so we sat down with a lot of different individuals and tried to come up with what we thought would be the the easiest way for us to give clarity to protect those individuals. Because I've learned a lot through this process. To me, intersex meant those individuals that were born with both male and female parts. And now I'm starting to learn, because I'm not in the science realm, it wasn't one of my strong suits, is that intersex is almost a outdated term because of all these other binary, would that be the right term? Or
It's DSD.
what is it I'm meaning to say here?
Instead of intersex, DSD.
DSD, I guess, is kind of the new term that describes this, because they're finding out more on this X and Y's, and I'm not going to get into that. That's Representative Epley's and the other doctors on this committee's bailiwick. And so as we talked to other individuals, like I said, that weren't on this committee that had, concerns with it, and this was somewhat expressed the other day in our hearing, this was our way to try to address it. And I can tell you that the proponents are supportive of this amendment. Representative Burkamp.
Thank you. I'm not a scientist either, so just trying to digest all this information here. So in the amendment, and I took it to mean that development condition refers to DSD. Is that fair? And okay. So then for DSD, it says involves genes, hormones, etc. So when it comes to hormones, could that just mean an abnormally low amount of testosterone or estrogen, or I guess what are some variances there that falls under that bucket?
Representative Epley.
If my partners and other physicians want to jump in here, you can, but everything defaults to the X chromosome, generally speaking. And when the Y chromosome is present, then you get male characteristics that are developed. I mean, that's how it works biologically, and you got to have that. Lots of times the Y chromosome is not fully developed, or it's not fully manifest genetically, or there's alterations in what are called alleles, which are little segments of DNA on the Y chromosome. And so there's so many variances in this, it's hard to put it in one category, but we're trying to at least address that for those individuals that have these variances. To answer your question, there are people that there's people that used to have hormone differences that we didn't understand, and now we can finally trace it to basically defects on the Y chromosome. I'm not saying it's always because men are defective, but it's the Y chromosome that typically has manifestations of abnormality as it affects male and female development. And so just understand that. And there are even men that make androgen, but it's not absorbed. And so there's syndromes about that. And again, Dr. Aller, in her testimony, she had a lot to cover. She talked about that. And so I just thought we needed to recognize that. And for those individuals that are not comfortable because they're in an ambiguous situation, they could go have privacy and security in their own bathroom. And we're talking about, again, not a large segment of our population. We're talking about, I think, honestly, that affects realistically less than 0.1% of individuals.
And just a quick follow-up, and I agree with that. I guess just maybe per some of the earlier conversation, if this is like an area that's evolving, it just seems to me on certain segments of this, it's something that you could point back 10, 15 years later in life and say, well, this, I don't know, this has changed. It just seems like it's still a very gray area that's evolving, the DSD world. So, and again, my lack of knowledge kind of is where my hesitancy is from, I suppose.
Representative Epley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's no question. This is a moving train. This is a moving target. I wish it was 1960 and, little Johnny's a boy and Mary's a girl and that's how it is, period. It's not that way at all anymore. And it's getting a little more confusing all the time. And I just felt the need after talking to a lot of individuals. And I talked to Dr. Aller. I called her and visited with her. And while she didn't think this was a perfect solution, she thought it was at least part of a solution for part of the DSD folks and others that do have both. Some have disabilities, some do not, and some manifest in different ways as they grow and develop. And they may want to not go to the bathroom that they were assigned from their birth certificate. And if they have a proven issue, then I think we should allow them to do that. I think that's just human dignity. We need to give everyone value and let them have an identity. Otherwise, we're going to leave people without an identity on the edge, and it's not going to go well.
Representative Berquist.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Epley, you mentioned that the Y chromosome is the one that seems to have abnormalities in it regarding both development. I don't understand it all.
We found that the majority of the time as the primordium develops everyone has an X chromosome, but only men have a Y chromosome. And so the Y chromosome, as it evolves sometimes, doesn't develop in the traditional way that we think of as a male. And so then we get all types of genetic variants, mosaicism, if you will. And it also affects hormone levels, and it can affect the development of the genitalia in those individuals. And and also affect them during the time they go through puberty, which, it may not be 10 years or 12 years till after birth till they determine that they have one of these conditions. And then it all makes more sense why they feel and act the way they do.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all.
Representative Barth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just thought of a question. Can you point out directly in the ADA specifically where it's at that it spells out this exact same language so that, if not, I'm going to request that we have some time to research.
Just to let you know, we are on a time frame on when these bills can advance forward. If it is your desire to see this bill cease and desist, as that's what will happen here today, if we wait for that. Scott's he's not a researcher, so.
Okay.
And I'm not going to ask him to do that right now
Are we meeting Wednesday still?
on another bill.
Did you know, is there anywhere where we could find the language in that applies to that, if it does have it in there?
I don't have that answer for you.
Okay, thanks.
Representative Bryce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one other quick question. I'm just thinking of patients I've had, say, hermaphrodite patients, and if this bill becomes law, would this require Kansas businesses to accommodate a neutral restroom, or would it? Okay, that's my question. Thank you.
In our discussions, and, because one of the things that was raised, especially in our schools, and then in talking to some of the businesses, it may be the ability to, like in some of the schools, they will allow individuals to use maybe a faculty's restroom and faculty locker rooms. In the businesses and even in some of our schools, it may be that an individual is allowed to go into a restroom while someone makes sure that no one else can enter at that time to provide them those protections. So it doesn't mean that a separate bathroom would have to be built.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make sure it's not imposing more structural requirements on businesses. Thank you.
Right, and that was one thing we wanted to be careful on. Representative Barth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you remind us what DSD is for the acronym? Would you mind, please?
It's the first D, I think, is dysmorphia, sexual differences, and I'm not sure of the first D, and I should have.
The first got it.
Do you have it, Bill?
Just, I was researching.
Representative Clifford.
Thank you for recognizing me, Madam Chair. Disorders of sexual development is more of a common lay term for DSD.
Okay.
Further questions? Representative Bryce.
Sorry to keep beating this horse. I noticed just on the amendment, it has differences in sexual development. Would, according to the previous representative's question, should that be disorders in sex development? Would that be more appropriate in order to go along with the criteria that we've talked about? Thank you.
Representative Epley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And trying to maintain here, I think differences, disorders gets into the weeds a little bit. And I think we don't want to be too judgmental in the terminology in the bill. So that's why again, the folks that we reached out to wanted to use the word differences rather than disorders.
Representative Bryce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one other thing, if I were to take this to its logical end, then I think we all have differences in sexual development at some point, and that just doesn't seem to have a definition that I think would have much teeth, but thank you.
All right. Further questions or comments? Maybe what we could do here at this point, Representative Epley, with your motion, if your second is fine with it, that we withdraw at this time here and see if we've got time to take it up another day, possibly.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that all right with the second? Who was my second? Representative
Clifford, I
that good
concur.
with you?
I concur. Yes,
All right.
I move to withdraw. And
Second withdrawals.
All right. Desire of the committee, we'll suspend hearing on 180 and may or may not get back to it. Now we will open up committee the hearing for Senate Bill 131, and we will hear from Revisor Abbott to explain to us what that is.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, committee. Substitute for Senate Bill 131 comes to you from the Senate Committee on Public Health and Welfare. The bill authorizes an out-of-state physician to practice medicine on a limited basis at a sporting event in Kansas with a sports waiver issued by the State Board of Healing Arts. To receive a sports waiver, the applicant must submit an application, hold an unrestricted license, and not be the subject of any investigation or disciplinary action by any applicable licensing agency, have professional liability coverage for the duration of the sporting event, meeting minimum coverage required in Kansas, as well as one of a written agreement with a sports team, having been invited by a national sport governing body at a national sport training center, or to an event or competition sanctioned by the national sport governing body. The physician would be limited to the scope of practice defined in law in Kansas and providing services required under the written agreements to provide services. The sports waiver would be valid for the time certified for each sports event, not to exceed 30 days, and a physician could not receive more than 5 sports waivers in any one calendar year, except for extenuating unforeseen circumstances. The bill would require the physician or associated out-of-state sports team to report to the State Board of Healing Arts any potential violation of the Healing Arts Act, including in professional incompetence and unprofessional conduct. The bill authorizes the State Board of Healing Arts to enter into agreements with medical and osteopathic licensing boards of other states in order to implement the bill, including reporting license status. The bill authorizes the State Board of Healing Arts to adopt procedures to allow other healthcare providers who are licensed and regulated by the board to issue sports waivers under similar circumstances for those other professions. The bill would become effective upon publication in the statute book July 1 of this year. And substitute for Senate Bill 131 did pass the Senate 39-0 on February 23rd. Madam Chair, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Questions of Revisor Abbott? All right, seeing none, thank you very much, Scott. All right, our first proponent would be Senator Jeff Pittman. Now we know why you're here in this committee. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Vice Chair Epley, Ranking Reese, and all the committee. I want to thank you all for your service to our state, first off. And I want to thank you for the thoughtful, refreshing debate on that last issue. It was great to hear. This bill is a lot different. It came to us, it's a bipartisan bill sponsored by myself, Senator Erickson, as well as Senator Dahl, both very heavily involved with sports in their background. And I was very surprised to hear when the American Medical Society for Sports Medicine came out with a report that said Kansas was one of only 4 states that had an issue with team doctors that traveled with professional sports teams, college sports teams, really competitive teams that have team doctors. We're one of 4 states that didn't have any provisions to allow them to practice on the team itself when they came into the state of Kansas. And talking with the Kansas Medical Society, this has been tried before, but it kind of petered out. And now we're back again to see what we can do here. And so the bill simply allows a team doctor who's got an agreement with a team to come into the state of Kansas for that event to practice on the team only, so it doesn't affect any Kansans per se, and therefore be legal as they're doing these things. And it provides a consistency of care. It provides no cost to Kansas, and it actually allows more visibility, I believe, to the Board of Healing Arts on those who are coming into our state to practice on their teams themselves. So I think it's great for the visibility. There were some challenges when we initially brought the bill. We'll say that the partners in here, the stakeholders like the Kansas Medical Society, the Board of Healing Arts, as well as the American Medical Society, we all got together and in quick manner resolved the differences, and that's why we have a substitute bill in front of you today. I appreciate you taking a look at this. I appreciate if you will work this bill and help resolve this, and I'll stand for any questions.
All right, and Senator, I'm sure you have other committees and things to get to, probably the floor, maybe?
Yes, ma'am.
Is, let's go ahead and take your questions so that you can get out of here. If I understand this correctly, it's basically when teams are coming into our state to participate in sports, they want to bring their own trainers, et cetera, and this would cover those trainers while they're in the state of Kansas, correct?
Specifically, any kind of professional that would be covered by the Board of Healing Arts, like a chiropractor or a physician, yeah.
All right, Representative Reese?
Thank you, Senator. I know sports teams, when they come into the state, they have to pay a tax because they're playing in a state that they're not home. How would that, would the physicians have to do the same thing?
Madam Chair, at this time, there's nothing in the bill that would require any additional fees be levied against the physician at this point.
And can I have another question? And then I'm wondering about any kind of liability issues.
Absolutely. So that was a concern of the Board of Healing Arts, and these doctors would be covered by their home state and the liability practices of their home state. So they have to be fully inside of the bill language. They have to have malpractice and liability as part of the conditions.
Thank you.
Representative Blex.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator. It's always good to see a House-trained senator come over and testify and give us a lot of words of wisdom. I think this is a no-brainer. I can't see why we haven't done it quicker, so I appreciate you carrying that. Thank you.
Don't give him too much credit, because I don't. No, I'm glad that you're here. Are there further questions of the senator? Representative Turner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for being here. I don't think I remember reading it in your testimony or hearing it, but how's this happening today? Who's covering these teams?
It's a great question. The reality is they probably have some individuals who are practicing illegally in the state, I'll be honest. Ideally, what they're doing is they're contracting with local physicians when they come in, and they are helping with that continuity of care on their individuals with doctors that are in the home state. Or if they have a continuous relationship inside the state, some of the doctors will get certified in the state if it's an ongoing relationship where they come here very, very frequently. But I can't say I know of anybody who's been practicing here illegally. So,
well, I just wonder. I mean, I go to my niece's volleyball stuff, and I just assume they relied on medical folks with that tournament or with that event. I didn't know if they just didn't travel with the team. But thank you for your comments.
Yep. Could probably be a combination of both, I believe. Representative Berquist?
Yes, thank you, Senator, for being here. So the agency, insurance company that provides the liability for those individuals, would they have to be notified of having that person being out of their zone of regular influence in order for this to be in effect, or is that just up to their responsibility to let them know?
Madam Chair, Representative, I believe that would be up to them. We don't really regulate those states and those liability limits over there.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Committee, are there further questions of the senator? All right. Seeing none, thank you, Senator, for being here today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really appreciate it.
All right. Next committee, we have Courtney Seisman, General Counsel, Kansas State Board of Healing Arts. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Courtney Seisman. I'm General Counsel of the Kansas State Board of Healing Arts. The Board of Healing Arts is tasked with licensing and regulating 16 different healthcare professions in Kansas, including physicians, chiropractors, athletic trainers, physical therapists, and many more. I won't restate what the bill does. The revisor did a great job on that, but the proposed legislation before you represents a collaborative effort to ensure that healthcare professionals who come into Kansas for these sporting events have a quick application process so they can start practicing here quickly in the limited scope, but also make sure that patients are protected because under the sports waiver, they're treated as a licensee for purposes of their applicable Practice Act. So in the event of unprofessional misconduct or professional incompetence, the Board of Healing Arts would have a legal remedy against those individuals. And the board stands in support of the sports waiver legislation. There are just two technical amendments that the board does recommend, which I've outlined in my testimony and a markup of the bill as well. In section 1E on page 2, line 13, we recommend changing a physician to any individual. As mentioned previously, we would be able to open this up to more than just physicians. And so we would recommend that it be changed to any individual who's issued a sports waiver would not be construed to permit healthcare services or consultation to any individual in Kansas other than as authorized by the sports waiver or at a practice at a licensed healthcare facility in Kansas. The second proposed amendment is Section 1, subsection H, page 2, line 35 through 38. We just recommend that this be deleted. The Board of Healing Arts does not need other state medical boards. We don't need anything from them to actually implement this bill, and there's no prohibition against the State Board of Healing Arts reporting any sort of potential violation to another state medical board in the event of that occurrence. And with that, I'm happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
All right, we'll go through our other conferees first. Thank you. Next, I have Dr. Nicole Yedlinski. Did I mispronounce that?
No, Madam Chair, that was perfect. Yes, I'm virtual.
Right.
Can you hear me?
You're with the Kansas Academy of Family Physicians. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Dr. Epley, and members of the committee. I'm here providing testimony on behalf of both the Kansas Academy of Family Physicians and the American Medical Society of Sports Medicine. I am a proud family and sports medicine physician practicing in Kansas City, and then I live in Leavenworth County, and I'm the team physician for Lansing High School. I'm grateful to Senators Pittman, Dahl, and Erickson for bringing forth this legislation. As has been stated, this just provides some clarity and a waiver for physicians or other healthcare professionals who travel from out of state into Kansas to provide care for their team. As you know, the physician-patient relationship is really special, and physicians know their athletes well, as has been recognized recently with some high-profile situations of athletes who have suffered pretty significant injuries. Having a physician and other healthcare professionals who know their athletes well is very important for their care. Oftentimes, as one question that was asked was about providing care currently. I do practice. I have a license in both Kansas and Missouri. So oftentimes what will happen is if we travel out of state, we will partner with the local physicians to make sure that the appropriate emergency action plans are in place. Just wanted to restate that these provisions are limited and temporary, and also that Kansas right now is one of only 4 states that does not have some type of waiver or licensure clarity for physicians who are traveling out of state. We want Kansas to be attractive for sporting events, and this Senate Bill 130 is one way to make that happen. So I thank you for your support, and I can stand for questions.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Appreciate it. Next, I have Brian Williams on behalf of the American Medical Society for Sports Medicine.
Thank you very much. I also appreciate the opportunity to address the committee. I'm Brian Williams. I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy at the American Medical Society for Sports Medicine, which I'll point out is actually headquartered in Leawood, Kansas. We are a national organization focused nationally and represent sports medicine physicians in every state. But we're proud to be headquartered in Kansas and appreciate, again, this opportunity to testify. I don't really need to repeat everything that has been said. Dr. Yedlinski is actually a sports medicine physician and aptly kind of described the necessity to travel with sports teams. Physicians often provide a continuity of care for athletes who either they're trying to prevent injury or maybe are trying to recover from an injury throughout the season, and to have a sports medicine physician or an entire athletics training team to go along with the team is very important, we think, for continuity of care and for a proper medical attention to the athletes. The idea that there's 46 states right now that have some type of clarity. What we're looking for is a clarity resolved in terms of the medical license. So 46 states already have some type of licensure clarity. So that when a sports medicine physician travels with their team, there's either a waiver or some sort of procedure for them to practice medicine with their teams. And I again stress it's only with their teams, right, while they're out of state. And of course, Kansas is one of the four, as has been mentioned, that does not provide that clarity. On the liability issue, let me just mention there was legislation passed a few years ago at the national level in the United States Congress, bipartisan legislation that clarified at that medical liability level that liability insurance can travel across state lines for this very purpose. So that issue has been resolved at the federal level, and like was pointed out, each physician needs to arrange for that in their own medical malpractice liability insurance policy. So let me just conclude by thanking Senator Pittman. This issue was really brought forth by him and his team and the other sponsors of the legislation. We're really thankful for the valuable collaboration and help that we got from Courtney, the General Counsel at the Kansas State Board of Healing Arts. And we just believe that this legislation will clarify the issue so that teams can travel to Kansas and we can play sports. And I also will be available to answer questions.
All right. Thank you very much, Brian. I appreciate that. All right, committee, the other proponent testimony we have is written only from Travis Euler, Executive Director of the Kansas Chiropractic Association. And we have no opponents on it, so we'll open up questions for our proponents at this time. Questions or comments for our conferees. Representative Epley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is for Ms. Seisman, if she could come back from on the Board of Healing Arts. Just two questions. They're easy, too. They're not hard like what we just went through. In this legislation, it basically talks about physicians, correct?
Mm-hmm. In the beginning portion of it, but there is a portion at the end that opens it up to other professions licensed by the Board of Healing Arts.
Fantastic. And that's what I wanted you to clarify on your desire for that amendment change, on your First Amendment change, and you can reference that in your proposed amendments to change that from physician to any individual. Is that in keeping with that same logic?
Correct. And in terms of us opening up to other professions, we need to make sure that when we do open it up, it ensures patient safety.
I understand. Yeah. But it would allow trainers and other individuals helping the physician to also have the same type of coverage?
Yes, absolutely. Our intent is to open it up to athletic trainers, physical therapists, OTs, chiropractors, and physicians initially.
And so, Madam Chair, just last question.
Yeah, it'd only be individuals that the Board of Healing Arts licenses, so go ahead.
No, so that would then make it that, it would provide that with that amendment change in the wording of the bill as it is currently, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Committee, are there further questions? Representative Turner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Say in your testimony, you mentioned having legal remedy, or at another point, you mentioned referring to other states' medical boards. So if there was a complaint in the state of Kansas while a team was here, does Kansas go after them, or do you refer it back to their board? I'm just curious.
Yeah,
Thanks.
so that's a great question. I appreciate that. So the practice of medicine or athletic training or whatever healthcare profession occurs where that service is where the patient's located. So if that patient is located in Kansas, under this bill, the Board of Healing Arts would be able to go after that individual for a legal remedy there. We could also report to the home state, and we probably would let the home state know that, hey, something has happened. But that home state would have some difficulty in prosecuting the practice that actually occurred in Kansas, if that makes sense. So this cleans all of that up.
Okay, thank you very much.
Committee, further questions or comments? All right, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Oh, no, that's fine. Representative Bryce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I might have missed this, but are we limiting the sporting events to professional college athletics?
No, this
Is there
bill does
no
not do
definition of that?
No.
What would keep, say, someone that has a medical license in Texas wants to practice in Kansas, set up a cornhole tournament, and have the patients he wants to treat come to the cornhole tournament and practice? Thank you.
Well, believe it or not,
that's an interesting
believe it or
question.
not, I did learn this weekend that there are professional cornhole tournaments that happen. Oh my gosh, it's quite the deal. So
That's an interesting question. They would need to enter into a written agreement with the sports team to provide medical care to team members and coaching staff traveling with the team. So if I'm just talking off the top of my head, the cornhole team had a physician, they would need to enter into an agreement, but that's an interesting.
But they're not
scenario.
going to, I think it gets down to is, if I understand where you're headed, and it's a great question, no, it's a great question, is they're only going to be able to provide services to their team members, not services to Kansas residents, unless they're a member of that team. But they had to have probably been on that roster, and I don't know all the rules on, they would have to be on the roster or however they do theirs in advance of them coming in for a tournament.
And maybe this will clarify too, to actually qualify for a sports waiver, you have to meet one of the three options. You have to enter into a written agreement with the sports team to provide that medical care and travel with the team, be invited by a national sports governing body to provide health care services to team members, or be invited by a national sports governing body to provide health care services at a sanctioned event by the national sports governing body. So you've got to meet one of those three.
Representative Bryce.
Well, I'm for this bill.
No, I know.
But just playing the devil's advocate, I have a medical license in Texas. I don't in Kansas. And so if I got some Kansas people that were sick and I formed a cornhole team and I was their team doctor, it looks like I would be able to practice medicine without a license in the state of Kansas. And that's just, maybe I'm just playing the devil's advocate, but at an extreme.
I think that anyone that tried to get that creative, Representative Bryce, the Board of Healing Arts could definitely take swift action, I would believe.
Yes, because we would have legal jurisdiction under this bill.
Yes. Because they're the governing body. No, they're the governing body for what's underneath this bill. So now we'll be on the looking out for cornhole.
Yeah, I won't forget this. Yeah.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, Representative Berquist.
Just on Representative Bryce's comment, if they would be able to treat the ones on their own team that had been beaned, but not the ones that their team had beaned. All right, thank you.
Okay, we're done, committee. We're done. Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, thank you very much for being here. All right, committee, that closes the hearing on Senate Bill 131 without objection. We'd like to go ahead and work this bill. Seeing no objection, Representative Epley.
Madam Chair, thank you very much for the opportunity. I would like to move that the committee pass out Senate Bill 131 favorably for passage as we just reviewed.
You heard the motion by Representative Epley, seconded by Representative Reese. Comment, discussion on the bill to advance. Representative Blex.
Madam Chair, are we going to include those amendments in that recommendation, or that's just a clean bill, like the ones that the Medical Society was?
Who had amendment?
She did. Assessment.
Okay, so you were wanting these amendments, and okay, all right. So, committee, you're going to withdraw your motion.
No, I can go ahead and amend it.
Oh, you can amend it.
Yes, I can.
Representative Epley.
Madam Chairwoman,
Yeah, I'm on a roll. I'm trying to move.
I appreciate your focus and
We don't operate like the Senate.
desire. So, with our lovely revisor present and taking into account the recommendations for proposed amendments, I would like to make the proposal for the two amendments as outlined by our conferee for change of physician to any individual, and to delete in section 1H, page 2, 35 to 38, the deletion as outlined.
Seconded by Representative Reese. And if you'll note, committee, it's on the second page of the testimony from the Kansas State Board of Healing Arts, or the amendments he's referring to. Are there questions or comments on the amendments? Representative Barth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I caught where the page 2, 35 to 38 would be amended, but where was the other one? We're changing the physician to an individual. What page and line was that?
So that, Madam Chair.
It's actually, if you look on page 2 from the Kansas Board of Healing Arts, it says page 2, 1, 35, 38, delete.
And then the other
There was another
19.
one.
19.
On the
Physician,
second
any
page?
individual.
Because if you look at the attachment of the bill, they actually highlighted those on the page, so it would be on page 2. So you'd have,
Where's the first one?
Attached to our testimony.
Positions there.
yeah,
Oh, there
page
we
2
go.
is where the amendments are all at, and the deletions. It was in the testimony. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Further questions, discussions, or comments, committee? Representative Orpeza. Hey, I saw your hand that time.
And I just had a quick question because I'm still trying to find the lines. So when it says any individual, should that also say that is currently under the Board of Healing Arts, or does it have to be that specific? I don't know if that's to, or Scott?
Okay, do you have your Board of Healing Arts testimony?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and then are you looking at on page 2, so which one are you referencing? Do you know?
It was the, sorry, I'm going to go back to the,
That's all right. I had to go back through a couple of things here, so.
okay,
Have to be
here's
issued
the bill.
waiver.
Right, so she took her out, so there's nothing.
Could be any individual issued a waiver.
I'm in the bill.
Okay, you need to go.
I've seen the test.
Would you, yeah, would you like
I've seen the
to
testimony,
respond to that, Courtney, for us?
So,
Okay, wait a minute,
Individual.
just a moment. Representative Orpeza, I think she's going to be able to clarify that for
yeah,
you.
it just needs to be changed to any individual because what follows right after that is issued a sports waiver under the provisions of this section.
I think that's what I was losing it. Thank you.
So it could be anyone that's covered under the Board of Healing Arts licensure, correct? Yep. Does that help? All right. Further questions, comments, discussion on the amendment? All right. Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes appear to have, ayes do have it. Motion carries. Back on the bill. Representative Epley.
I close.
No, you have to move.
I move that
the
we pass. I'd like to close.
Senate Bill 131.
Senate Bill 131 as amended, out to the committee as a whole.
All right. Second by Representative Reese. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion carries. Bill passes. All right, committee, that concludes our business today. I don't believe we're scheduled for anything tomorrow. Is that correct? So we'll see you all on Wednesday, 1:30. Or adjourn.